All right, I think we can just start the conversation now. So I'm joined here with Anis Uzzaman, the CEO and general partner at Pegasus Tech Ventures. I just want to remind everyone that you can type in your questions in the chat and I will read them over and then ask Anis, and also have a few questions that I saw from the impact stage. So this will be a continuation of the panel session that we just had, and more on what investors are looking for in 2021, but also basically whatever is on your mind when it comes to VC matters. So Anis, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you very much, Mark, for having me.
Yeah. So there was a question now from the impact stage that was asking about how, because we were discussing new ways that people could get in touch with VC founders when everybody had to pivot online. Mm-hmm. Are there any particular examples of that you could provide with people? Should they just bombard you with LinkedIn requests?
So I think, LinkedIn is the best way to get in, but we're getting a lot more requests from LinkedIn because of the COVID situation than we used to get before. So one of the things that people can definitely do is to come through a third-party reference. So they should find out who are some of the people that they know in our organization. For example, there are many different partners, employees. So I think, as you are approaching any VC, it is always good if you go through someone that, the VC company is directly connected to, that can come as a reference, and you will most probably get a higher priority. Because if you're just coming through online and cold connection, sometimes it might take a little bit more longer time than you can expect.
Okay, but you mentioned that it's good to go through a connection you already made, but now I guess there's another hindrance in that way. So people used to do networking in a quite in-person manner. So it's easier to reach VCs or people close to VCs when you can attend the same functions. But do you feel like that's still going on now that everything's gone digital? So how has your networking experience been?
So that there are a lot of networking events happening online. There, in Silicon Valley, we are seeing sometimes the network events are happening. They're calling it happy hours, and they have small wine bottles they're sending to all people. There are services like that from the wineries that you can get small bottles and you can do wine tasting while you are talking with a bunch of people. We are doing that quite a bit, actually, being, California, close to the Napa Valley. So we're doing that, but it is still not as effective and good, Mar, as we have seen in the traditional days, right, before the COVID. So it has become a little difficult. You talked about how to reach out to the VCs in an effective way. And the other way people are reaching out to the VCs in an effective way is through some of the social networks. For example, Twitter-based inbox is not also a bad situation. If you go through Twitter in mail, you can also reach out to some of the people. And that is another way, you can reach out to some of the people that you might think is impossible to reach out. I myself, I'm reaching out to a bunch of new people all the time because we also need to grow our own network as VCs. And I try through different things. I try through, obviously, LinkedIn first. I also try through Twitter. And I have had better luck nowadays with Twitter-based direct email.
Okay, Twitter, that's interesting because, maybe before the pandemic, Twitter, especially in the US where you're operating, might have been considered quite a toxic platform, but it's also created quite a lot of niches in, for example, the academic community. They often share their findings through Twitter. So, what exactly has changed within your usage of Twitter? So you're just jumping straight in DMs, or is it that you feel like more of the discussion is taking place on that platform?
So more discussions are taking place because of in the election year in the US, a lot of politicians have used Twitter in an effective way. And because of the so-called fact check functionality of the tool, it has been under a lot of inquiry and investigation and many other things. However, on my use of Twitter, I'm not just posting something on the Twitter. Twitter also have an option where you can direct message someone. So if you have done direct messaging within the Twitter, I think it is very effective. It hits your all notifications right away comparing to LinkedIn, and I have had better luck with that recently. So many promising founders have also reached out to me directly through direct messaging functionality of the Twitter, and I have seen that they pinged me from so many different directions that I just replied back and said like, hey, let's hang out at this time. I will call you up, or let's hang out over Zoom, something like that.
Do you feel like you're going sooner? So would you ever do that before the pandemic, or would you just like let things stack up in your inbox and not really think about it? Like, do you feel like there's a smaller barrier to entry when it comes to an actual conversation?
You're right. I mean, if I were in the regular times, most likely I would have not been that responsive online, because we only spend certain amount of time with direct communication and then certain amount of time online. So I'm definitely spending much more time online now, and even doing direct messaging on Twitter than comparing to what I used to do before.
So we have a question that was asked on the main stage. So there was a lot of talk about that. There was a difference in how to manage portfolios, and how a lot of you in the panel had changed your methods in that sense and maybe optimized them more. But have you done more deals during this time? And now you talked about your Creepia deal, but have there been actually more volume, or has it been more valuable smaller deals?
I would say that more volume and more valuable, both in some sense. During this pandemic time, in our case, and I think most of the other VCs around me, because I'm sitting in Silicon Valley, as you can see, there are thousands of venture capitalists here in this area. So as I talk to my friends and colleagues who are also in the venture capital domain, they are doing a lot more deals today in some sense, because they're able to spend more time, doing these things. This is their main job, right? I mean, while we're in the regular time, we also do events and different other things. So I'm seeing that, in our case, we have done more deals. We have had more interaction with the startups. We have also done better deals in some sense. So during this pandemic, I talked about Quibi is one of the investments we did. That was a very big investment in some sense. So overall, they raised $1.75 billion. But I also invested in a company called Triller. Triller actually is also another social media platform. They call it American TikTok. And you know that TikTok is under a lot of controversy as well. So
that's a good time for an American version of TikTok, I guess.
Exactly. And I invested in that with lowercase capital. And it was a tough decision, because one of the things, Mark, that we are struggling with during this pandemic time is to creating the new set of rules. And what I mean by the new set of rules is a lot of VCs are asking that how many times we need to meet a founder online to make their final decision. Because before, I used to meet you in person. There's a lot of things I can see because of the physical interaction, but today I cannot see it. I can see only a screen. So there's a lot of talks in the Silicon Valley and in the venture capital community about how and what are the new protocols, that how many times you have to meet someone on Zoom to actually make that investment decision. For us, we have also created our own set of rules, and we're following that and doing the investments right now.
But I guess I want to jump a bit on that, because I think like the founders in the audience might be interested. So how good of a sign is it if they've managed to get 3 Zoom meetings? Does it mean anything, or is it barely getting your foot in the door?
3 is a pretty good sign, I'll tell you that. So if you have gone to the second meeting, your hopes should be, let me give you a percentage, okay? So if you got the first meeting, you're 50% there, right? I mean, you're just talking to us, we are interacting, because you're picked from hundreds of people who are applying to us. Then the second stage, if I take you to the second meeting, you are most probably at 70% for sure. If you get a third meeting, you are at most probably 90%. And if you get the fourth meeting, most probably you're getting very, very close there. So in some sense, yeah, if you got 4 meetings, you're almost discussing the deals and negotiating.
Okay, great. We have a question here. So how has COVID-19 changed your investment strategy going forward? are you now eyeing up sectors you weren't before, or vice versa? And I guess your creepy deal is kind of related to that. So is that a new field for you due to COVID-19?
Yes, so you are absolutely right, and that's a good question. So my investment areas have changed and has been influenced by the pandemic quite a bit. I'm looking more into e-learning, and I have not invested in e-learning that much before. I am looking at also online-based healthcare platforms in a big way. I'm looking into media. I'm also looking at e-conferencing. I'm also getting very interested because there is a lot of traffic and infrastructure. It needs to be upgraded to 5G and 6G. I'm starting to look into 5G and 6G investments. So the answer is absolutely. We need to also adapt ourselves to the new world. And I'm sure that every single VC is looking into the next top hot areas where they can invest, and so do I.
Okay. Now, next question is kind of connected. So were there any investments you passed on that you ended up kicking yourself about?
We always pass on some investments, right? I was investing in a company recently, which is related to, for example, material, a startup which is in the process of creating and producing graphene from raw materials. And I had to pass that deal because I was very worried about their manufacturing capabilities, because COVID has hit the manufacturing in a big way, and I'm not sure when things are going to be back up. So I had to pass on that deal because there is a high dependency of that product and technology in manufacturing, and manufacturing has been hit in a big way during this pandemic.
So it's not that you missed an opportunity that grew big, you're just kind of sad about the fact that this opportunity would have been good in another situation.
That's correct. So that's why I always encourage the new entrepreneurs that if you want to make a little bit of pivot where you also take COVID into consideration as you're pivoting to your business, and that happens in the startup area all the time, I think you are making a smart decision that way, because investors would like to hear that you have adopted and you have changed things because of COVID, and that's a very good thing for us to hear from you.
Okay, so you're not sick of hearing every pitch start with, this is the new solution to the new normal?
I would rather love that rather than not, right? I mean, when a founder comes to us and you're getting into serious discussion, and many times more, they're getting into discussion like, oh, I want to do this, I want to spend this much, I want to make this much money, and I'm going to spend this much for this. When they do that, I always want to see two scenarios. One is with pandemic and when the pandemic is over, because you're spending your income, everything is going to change based on the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And I would love to see both. If you present both scenarios, I'm sure that any reasonable investor will be convinced that you exactly know how the world works.
Okay, so now for those that might be looking into starting off the very beginning of investing, we have a question of, what are your thoughts on micro investing? I've been thinking about putting $500 in the stock market, maybe flip it around, 1,000, 2,000, and open a VC of my own. Curious to get feedback.
It will be great if someone can start with 500,000 and can still become a VC. But if you're thinking of investing, especially in the private sector, which is what we do, venture capital, we're investing in the private sector. It's an amazing experience. It's an amazing, job. I think I will strongly recommend anyone and everyone to actually consider this. This can actually really help you to get in touch with some of the most amazing people, because the founders, they're amazing, they're very powerful, and I have a lot of respect for them. I will definitely recommend, investing and experiencing this. Investing in a small scale at the beginning to try out how things go is a definitely good idea. Please remember that many very famous companies were also raising in a very, very high range, like they're raising hundreds of millions of dollars. There are ways that you can also get in today with micro investment into those deals as well, and those deals can become your portfolio.
But does Kickstarter count towards that?
Of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, that actually can give you an experience to get started with, and you can definitely see after your investment how that company has evolved and changed. And many Kickstarter companies, Mar, as we know, that have done well. And your vision and your insight to pick that up the right company is definitely can be a sign of confidence for you when that company does well, and then you can do it in a larger scale. But I will definitely ask you to take it slow and steady, and you will win the race.
Yeah. So next question is, how can entrepreneurs grab your attention given the current market conditions?
Do something unique. I mean, do not come in and tell me that it's $1 billion idea. That's the biggest mistake you make. Whenever you say, it's $1 billion idea, that's a big mistake. What are the things that can catch my attention? Give me the most visible highlight of your company in your email or in your message to me. For example, I have had a partnership with Philips. I have had a partnership with Deutsche Telekom. Give me that, right? And that might be good enough for me to take you on and go forward, because a large corporate partnership means a lot to us. Tell me that you actually gone through some of the prototyping. Tell me that you have 10 patents. Tell me that you had 3 PhDs from University of London. Tell me something that is very unique to us. Tell me that you are this is your third company. You have already done well with your first 2. So something that is great about your company, you need to know what that is. And I'm sure that every single company has something going on for them. You should say that. Maybe you are none of those, and your product, when you put it on App Store or in Google Play, you have had like maybe 10,000 downloads in the first few hours. Tell me that. That's what I need. And I think that many of the entrepreneurs miss that.
But so can the unique selling point be about something else than a product? Would it be enough to sell on the talent itself rather than
yes,
idea?
Many times, Mar, when I'm investing in seed round, and I'm investing a lot in the seed round as well, I look at the people, right? Sometimes maybe your educational qualification actually makes a lot of difference. I'm not trying to discriminate or anything, but we need to have some parameters to actually judge you sometimes when you do not know you well enough. So tell me that you have a very unique, PhD or a unique master's degree or a very unique bachelor degree from a very unique, university. Tell me something about that. Tell me that you have worked in 10 different startups before you started this firm. That actually makes a lot of difference to us. So your personal experience and qualities do definitely help us a lot.
But he also mentioned the partnerships. Now, there have been cases where you can see startups kind of embellish the level of partnerships with the companies. So what would you say are the parameters? Is it enough that the company has bought their product once? Does that qualify as a partnership, or are there any guidelines you would like to give entrepreneurs on that?
At the very beginning, most of the large corporations, they actually go through a test which is called POC, proof of concept, timing, which is the prototyping type stage of the partnership in some sense. So if you have gotten into a POC with the corporations, that's a good enough. Please be very precise about what are the success criteria you have in place, and what is the possibility of you to go through those success criteria set up by the large corporate, and what is your possibility there. If you have started multiple POCs, proof of concept, testing with a few companies, I think that's not a bad idea. So I will definitely encourage you to have a corporate partnerships. Most likely that corporate partnerships have not, given you any income yet, but I think the start point and having that relationship, and you have already spent some time with the corporation, it will be good enough for us to actually give the confidence that you can do it.
All right, so let's move on to the next question. So what advice would you give startups considering approaching a VC firm?
I will tell that, approach, sky is the limit. So approach as many people as you can. Do your research, so approach everyone. Obviously, if you're in Europe, if you're in Netherlands or England or France, approach the local community. Please know that during this pandemic time, each government has some schemes to help you out as well. So please understand that knowledge is power. So the more you know about how to get funding, this better. If you are a very early stage company, try to get into an incubator or accelerator, because they have some funding as well. A Y Combinator is a good one. If you can get into Y Combinator, and if you're thinking with an idea, please try to get into that, because if you can get into Y Combinator, most probably you have a higher degree of success in terms of possibility of being successful. I will say that as you're looking for a VC, try to approach many people, because you do not know who is going to respond to you and how you will get attention of a certain person. Do not be afraid. I personally have approached some of the most famous people, and you'll be surprised, they do respond if you are very diligent about it. Write emails at least 3, 4, 5 times to a certain investor until you get their attention. So I would say that never give up. It's all a volume game. The more people you have approached, the better. You also do a little bit of mix, please. Don't only go for hotshot VCs, because VCs can be a little bit more busier. Please also go for angel investors, because angel investors, it's an individual. The decision-making process might be much easier than a full-blown VC. So a mix of everything will help you out for sure.
Okay, so despite things moving more online now, and technically no borders between, you don't have to go in person or fly anywhere to have a meeting, you still recommend focusing first on your local community?
It's better that way, that because you want to mix it up a little bit, because your initial most probably working ground is local, and your consumers most likely is local at the beginning. You also understand the culture and language of your country. So if you're in Russia, most probably you should try the product for your neighborhood in Russia, and then move forward and go beyond that. That's what most of the entrepreneurs do. Again, it all depends on your product and technology that you're playing with. But I will say that when you're also fundraising, try the local community, because you might get some help there, and then go for international. If you're sitting in Europe, please do not hesitate to reach out to an investor in the US, because I'm investing in France and England and Holland and even in Brazil, Sao Paulo, all the time. Because these entrepreneurs, today, as Mario said, there is no boundary. I mean, maybe this COVID happened for a good reason of breaking that boundary of countries, and actually made us put all together. I am investing, by the way, during this pandemic. I've invested in a bunch of European companies myself, but they're very good startups, and they have approached in the right way. They went through the right channel, and then we could actually make a win-win situation for both parties.
Okay, so now we've talked about new and exciting opportunities, but we also have a question here. If there's a particular industry or type of company you're always interested in, so is there a classic that you still
For me personally, my classic is I like artificial intelligence. So if you have an artificial intelligence company, I like a little bit technology, because before I became a VC, I was an engineer myself. So I have deep, affection for technology. So if you're an artificial intelligence company, a space exploration company, IoT company, big data company, please do reach out to me. But in my case, I have a little bit unique situation. Mara will take just a few seconds to explain. So Pegasus Tech Ventures, my firm, we are invested by 35 large corporations around the world. So when we actually work with you and we invest, our areas are very broad, from media to space. We actually invest in everything. By the way, during this pandemic, I also invested heavily in SpaceX, and I'm actually doing my second time right now. So space is another area that I'm investing. So I have large corporate partners behind me who has given us the $1.5 billion worth of capital. So we actually also invest into the companies who wants to partner with one of these companies. So it's a very unique model where when we give you our capital, we also make sure we give you an MOU from one of the large corporations, which is definitely a public corporation and pretty big one. So please go to our website, do apply, and if you get to work with us, we will not only get a capital but also get the additional help of the corporate partnerships, and that's actually very unique about our firm.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so, speaking of the founder's journey there, so what they get from you, we also have a question. In your opinion, what do founders need to know before signing term sheets? So, what is the last checklist?
One thing that most of the entrepreneurs make a mistake. Sometimes, going to the first step becomes so hard that they go through a bad experience sometimes. So they actually agree to all the terms and conditions given by the investor. I will not make that mistake, because you have to always think about the future. Please remember that every single stage of financing, you should give away only a certain portion of your stock. What I mean by that, if you're a seed company, do not give out more than 15-20% of the company. If you are at Series A, make sure that after you finish Series A, you have only given out 30 to 35% of your company. If you are a Series B company, make sure after Series B, you have only given out 40% of the company. Please remember, you need to be motivated and your team needs to be motivated. So one thing you need to do, make sure that you and your founders and your team members have enough shares left for yourselves, for the team, so that you have the motivation up until the very last day when you are doing an IPO in NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. So make sure you do that. So a basic rule of thumb, know how much to give out at every single stage. You do a backward calculation. Mars, I'll quickly explain. You got a seed round company and say, first of all, try to find out how much money you need. So if you say need $10 million, please remember that you can only give out highest 20%. So your 20% should be $10 million. That means that if you are a 100% company, your valuation should be $50 million. That's how it works. So do the backward calculation. Find out how much money you need and then how much shares you can give out. And as I said, seed round, do not give out more than 20%. I have had many founders approaching me at Series A, and when I see their cap table, I have to cry because they have given out 50% in the seed round, and that's a disaster. You have to redo everything. And it's a very, very messy situation. So be careful when you sign up and getting your check, as Martin mentioned. And Mar, I think you should most probably write about it that do not give out more than you're supposed to give, because this is going to be a disaster down the line. I have seen a company from one of the Asian countries, Mark, raise their Series C round, and literally the founders had less than 10%. And that was the reason I did not invest in the company, because their financial cap table and financial planning was extremely poor.
So we have time for one last question, and I'm gonna jump into, so there's one about the seed stage, since you were mentioning that part of the growth experience. So what type of growth or metrics do you look for before investing at seed stage? So not just how much they're giving away, but also what are the metrics?
So at the seed stage, the metrics is you. It is the person. So at this point, as long as you have a good plan, you are a good presenter. So practice well, right? You're a good presenter, and you can show your passion and energy and trust for the projects that you're working on. I think that's good enough. Seed round is all about you and your personality. I think as you're approaching a VC, look very clean, look very nice, talk very well. That is all matters in seed round, because we know that in a seed round is just an idea, and you might have a prototype, you might not, but you have a vision. All we see is passion and energy and you in a seed round, and that is the parameter for every single investors I have met.
I think that's great advice to end on. So we are just about out of time. Anis Uzzaman, I'm really happy to have you here at the TW 2020 and hope you had a great time. And I want to thank everyone that tuned in for this Ask Me Anything with Anis.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you very much.